But before we get to the content of tonight's session, I want to tell you a little bit about why CommNexus is here and welcome you here. So what I want to do first is always say thank you to our mentor sponsors. Those are the big bucks guys. They're the ones that donate money graciously to the organization. And continuously, we have over 35 mentor sponsors here at CommNexus and growing. So we have somebody in the back of the room. If your company's logo is not on here, we're more than willing to add you to the logo there. So 6 figures. No, it's not quite that much, but it's an investment with lots of benefits included into that. So thank you to our mentor sponsors there. So next thing I want to tell you about is EvoNexus. Okay, EvoNexus, as everybody knows, is, well, maybe you don't know, started in October of 2009. One of the largest incubators in the country. 2 locations, one downtown and one at UTC. And anybody can apply and be considered as one of the EvoNexus incubator members. There's no strings attached. You just have to submit your business plan and your ideas, and there's a committee that takes a look at it, and they give you the thumbs up or the thumbs down. And if you get the thumbs down, it doesn't mean you're done. It means you got to rework it and then go again and apply for another shot at being part of that. So, but you can see impressive numbers there. If you can't, in the back of the room, 713 applications received, 68 companies admitted. It's 1 in 10, so not bad. $541 million in total venture funding and acquisition. 26 graduates to date, not bad. 31 companies currently incubating, 7 acquisitions, and over 1,000 jobs have been created as a result of EvoNexus. So some pretty impressive figures with that organization so far. Next thing I want to tell you about is MarketLink. Okay, CommNexus has done a terrific job bringing major companies, global companies, into the San Diego market so that they can be exposed to medium and small-sized companies that have great ideas relevant to their business. The next one that we have coming up is with Huawei. And that MarketLink event is going to happen August 5th through 7th. So we'll have senior-level executives from Huawei that will be here and talking to various companies of different sizes about their ideas and their products that would be relevant to the Huawei products and services that they have in their global company. Applications are now open until July 11th, so you can go to the website for details on that. And if you haven't done so, please consider doing that. So let's talk about SIG events. The SIG organization, Special Interest Group, there's 17 of them. And Brittany, who's right here in the middle of the room here, raise your hand. A big round of applause for Brittany. She manages all 17 of these special interest groups. The next 2 that we have coming up here, June 26th, tomorrow night, is focused around M2M. And it's around security with machine-to-machine, secure and economically viable. So it's going to be at Latham and Watkins. And the feature companies, Tagnos, Qualcomm, and Viasat. So I understand that it's almost a sellout. So if you haven't signed up for it, is it closed for registration?
It is, but we're still accepting walk-ins at the door.
Okay, so you might have to stand at the back of the room, but definitely an event. I know a few of my colleagues at Solikai will be at that event. We're keenly interested in that area. After that, in July, we have one event, July 24th, that's being run by the Digital Health Special Interest Group, Accelerating the Genomic Revolution. And that will be located at the old Motorola, now Aris facility down the street here, and featuring some interesting companies in that space. And there's still plenty of time to sign up. You probably want to look at the new and improved website for CommNexus for details on that event coming up next month. So headliners, what's coming up to CommNexus? The big show. The next one's coming up August 12th, and it's robotics innovation. So as you see, the hub for the new age of robotic innovation, right there at Qualcomm headquarters. Has anybody been to these headliners? Let me see a show of hands. Who's been to the headliners? Okay, a fair number of you folks have gone to this. I highly recommend it if you haven't been to it. They get some big names that show up for these events. What's great about this event is they have an extra large number of demos that are at these events. Right now they have 10 demos that are confirmed. I think you're looking for a target of 15. So there's lots of stuff to play with in this space. And the featured speakers are coming from UCSD, Brain Corp, and 3D Robotics. In fact, the person from 3D Robotics is a Solikai alumni, Tim McConnell. He used to run engineering here at Solikai. So we're pretty proud of that Tim has graduated to a headliner event. So we plan to be there and do a little heckling. So that'll be fun. But I do want to stress the registration does fill up. You want to register early. It will sell out. I've been told clearly. It will sell out, and you will be turned away at the door. So
never turned away, but
yeah, all right. I was trying to get a little hype in there. Okay, so you could be turned away. Careful. Okay, all right. So let's move on to tonight's show here. So tonight, before I get into the show, I want to thank my colleagues. I'm one of the co-chairs for the Digital Media Special Interest Group, Dan Sweeney, and the others, Vinay and Mark and Naresh and Louis. Louis is our moderator tonight, and we get together a couple times a year. We come up with different subject matters in the digital media space. We've had a lot of fun doing this, and it's been a great opportunity to stay on the cutting edge for different areas of interest in this particular area. So, round of applause for all the co-chairs for the digital media space. So thanks so much. All right, but even a bigger round of applause for the folks that came in here and agreed to be the speakers for tonight's show. And you see them up there, Barry and Pablo and Pat. Pat flew in from Silicon Valley, so yeah, his arms are tired, so he's flying in and out for this one here. So
for Scott.
Yeah. So they promised to have a good-spirited discussion. I think you'll see a little debate that'll go on here tonight as well. So before we get into the content, and Louis takes over here, just a big thank you to Solikai for hosting the event. We're always grateful. ComNexus is always grateful for Solikai to host the event. It's a great facility. And tonight, just a couple of minutes on who Solikai is. I'd like to introduce John Stafford, who this week is our new president and CEO of Solikai Systems. John?
Welcome to everybody. My name is John Stafford. I'm the new CEO here. I think most of you know, but for those of you who don't, Solikai is a software design services and integration company. We're about 12 years young now, and we're in the process of doubling the size of the company. We have about 96 employees and contractors now and 11 on the way. And we operate in 4 vertical markets primarily, plus a few other things that come along, but our primary vertical markets are digital video, mobile wireless, connected health, and utility information systems. And our value proposition is sort of smart people for hire, and sort of our reputation is we rescue projects that are in trouble, or we stand up new projects that need to hit a tight time deadline with a lot of challenges. So that's enough of a commercial, but I just want to say thank you for coming. We're pleased to be part of the SIG event, and I'll turn it over to the panel.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. I'm Louis Karofsky. Can you guys hear me? I had a microphone failure the last time I was here, so hopefully that won't be an issue right now. I work at InterDigital in Sorrento Valley. My background is display technology and video compression. And one of the things I wanted to comment here is a little bit about our inspiration for choosing this topic. Dan mentioned sort of earlier this year and tried to pick some topics. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the Society for Information Display, big sort of the IEEE of display technology. They had their annual meeting here in San Diego earlier this month. So technologists, or geeks, I guess is the other word you can use, like to go there and see some of the new cutting edge technology and vision into content and everything from human visual system to, quantum dots, whatever those are. Some people may make some comments later on that. The other thing that was kind of inspiring me is this recent Amazon phone was announced. It's not really a 3D display, but it kind of is it adapts to the user. It's kind of a more advanced display technology. I think that's interesting.
Louis, hang on. We want to do an audio check for you so that folks can hear you.
All right.
Sorry about that.
No problem. I told you.
Test. Hello? Yep, that's good. Yep.
Test.
Test.
Sorry, guys.
The batteries are working at least.
Yes.
LEDs are.
I
Okay.
cranked you up too high, you down too low. My DJ skills are lacking, sorry, guys.
Wine.
Back to the show.
Back to the show. Feel a little naked here. I forgot my phone back at work. I'm struggling to survive through life without my phone. I won't distract you too much longer. Basically, just want to mention our format. We're going to let the individual panelists talk for a brief few minutes of our presentation, and then we'll reserve about half an hour for questions and answers, hopefully from the audience. Unless you really want to hear my voice talk more at the end of the program, please be thinking of some questions. A couple of topics I had on my mind you may want to consider. Just in general, the future of displays is one of the things we're talking about here. One of the things people probably have seen 4K and all these descriptions. HDTV, ultra high definition, is more than just more pixels. Okay, so I think that's something to think about. Maybe you can try and identify that as a theme of these talks. The other thing that's always a concern in my background and display technology is power consumption. Interesting how that impacts some issues here. The other thing is just some advances in 3D display technology, how those may be developed. So I think I'll let our panelists introduce ourselves. You want to just briefly introduce yourself and talk for a minute or two, and then we'll start the presentations?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, good. I'm Barry Sandrew, as you see, as you saw. I'm founder of Legend 3D here in Carlsbad. And what we do is we convert 2D movies into 3D. And we started about 4 years ago. Of course, we've been in research R&D for about 7 years. It came out right after Avatar, and we've been doing blockbuster feature films for Hollywood ever since. And we'll go through a little bit of that in my slides.
Hi, I'm Pat Griffiths. I'm Executive Director of Technology Strategy at Dolby, which means I look at things like the future technologies that impact the entertainment ecosystem in which we participate. The other hat I wear is as Vice President of Education of SIMPTE. And no, it's not a disease you take penicillin for. Anyone know what SIMPTE is? Raise your hands. Martin, you don't count. Yeah, Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. In fact, we were just talking, we had a conference last week at Stanford University talking about entertainment technology in the internet age, and clearly the convergence of Hollywood, which SIMPTE has historically represented, and Silicon Valley and the future growth of entertainment in that area. It was a really exciting conference. We talked about this novel idea of the entertainment holodeck, and those of you who are Trekkies, we've got the communicator. There's a holodeck not too far in the future, and we actually had a really interesting set of exhibits from Google, Google Glasses, a number of folks, 18 different things looking at the possibilities. So I'll make my little plug for SIMPTE since other people are. Great organization if you're interested in entertainment technology. But I'll be talking about the future of content going forward as a context for this discussion about the future of displays.
Hi everybody, I'm Pablo Espinosa. I work at Sony. I've been involved in displays at Sony now for almost 20 years. I started designing CRT displays back in the day. There was monitor displays with the collection systems. And I've seen displays go from, the CRT times through where we're at today, where it's really the most exciting times in displays I've seen in a long time, where we've got so many technologies coming together, and everything's still loose and up in the air as to where it's going to fall. I truly believe that we have seen the LCD device, for example, go from its diaper days back in the early 2000s to today, where we brought a demo of our top of the line XDR TV back there, which incorporates everything that makes picture quality today the greatest picture quality you can get on a TV, on an LCD TV, I believe. I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, I didn't bring any slides today, but I will be talking about things about what makes an LCD a good display today, as opposed to how it's evolved over time, and how things are becoming more of an immersive feeling for the consumer. And I can give more of a perspective from a consumer side as to where displays might be going now and in the future.
Hi, my name is Viswas from Qualcomm. I work as a display architect in Qualcomm, primarily responsible for the display system architecture for various Snapdragon processors. I used to work for the low-tier smartphone, what we call the smartphone for the emerging markets. These days, though, I work on a different kind of mobile processors called automobile processors, so which has own set of display constraints like heads-up display or displays that you can see in bright sunshine. So I work on those things. But I have been involved in display and video processing for a very long time. I used to work for National Semiconductor before, and then I worked at Marvell before moving to Qualcomm. And some of our designs have been used in various marquee brand consumer electronics, including Sony. So that's how I know Pablo from my days in Marvell. And these days we look at a very different processors. The mobile processors were power. We can do all sorts of processing, but power is very critical. If the display doesn't last you till the end of the day, then it doesn't matter anymore, irrespective of what you do. So I'll be talking mostly about the power optimizations and what kind of trends we'll see in the display industry for mobiles. Thanks.
I forgot, I want to plug both the demos we have in the back of the room. I hope people get a chance to see. We have a UHD TV.
Yes.
And we have a 3D demonstration. So please get a chance to listen to that. Just stick around. I'm just going to go in order of arrival here. Gary, that's just the last.
What?
Actually, I thought I might set some context.
Oh, yeah, please. Oh, yes, please. Sorry.
So do that one. There you go.
There you go.
Thanks. So the purpose of this panel is to talk about the future of displays. I thought I'd spend a few minutes talking first about the future of content and some observations. Yeah, that looks right. I can't see what I'm talking about. Never stopped me in the past. I guess it won't stop me now, for those of you who know me. But I'd like to spend some time talking about the future of content and one of the perspectives that Dolby has. We're well known for audio. What's not so well known is for the last 10 years we've been doing a lot of it in imaging, particularly in the cinema space. We make digital cinema projector technology, and we actually make professional reference monitors now. So we've studied a lot about what it takes to make great entertainment. Sound's half the picture's the other half of the entertainment experience. So we've actually done a lot of work here, and what I'd like to talk about is what we think are the 3 key elements of the next generation image formats. Of course, the first one is more pixels, and Sony's showing some great work there in terms of 4K. How many of you are engineers in this audience? Raise your hands. Be proud. And of course, we all know 4K, and I spent many years before Dolby. I worked at Microsoft and then Panasonic and started my career as a TV engineer in RCA. So I find it ironic when we talk about 4K from a marketing viewpoint. 4K is really 8 megapixels. And since more is better, if 2K, which is HD, and 2 megapixels is good, I never figured out why my CE friends haven't used 8 as the number of 8 megapixels as the number for 4K. But be that as it may, more pixels, more resolution, more spatial resolution. We kind of all understand that from our cameras with 2, 4, 8, 16 megapixels. More pixels means potential for more spatial resolution. Apple calls it retinal display. The interesting thing about that is more pixels alone is not sufficient to give you more resolution. There's a thing called contrast sensitivity, which is well known in cinema, and that talks about the difference between black to white transitions that create sharp edges that our eyes detect. So more pixels alone isn't actually the true indicator of greater resolution, but clearly one of the factors. The next one, of course, is if you have motion pictures, which for movies and entertainment we do. In order to deal with things like motion blur, we've all seen what happens when a camera pans and you lose spatial resolution because you now don't have enough images. Start to lose temporal resolution because of motion blur. You also have things like motion judder. To get rid of that, the way we solve it is sending more frames per second. Sending more frames per second means more pixels per second, aka faster pixels. So this is your shorthand as you go away. It's a presentation I've done for presidents at Hollywood studios. They like it because they can remember it. So your sound bites, more pixels, faster pixels. And then the last one, and the one that we don't believe has gotten a lot of attention, what I'm going to spend my time talking about in terms of next generation imaging, is making every pixel better. What do we mean by better? Making them brighter, making them darker, making them also more colorful, because color, in order to represent brighter colors, we also need brighter whites. So better pixels, we're going to talk a little bit about. And in deference to my friend Barry, I guess if we were talking about 3D, we'd be talking about the other element, which is pairs of pixels. And all three of these apply to those pairs as well. So as we talk about better pixels, what do we really mean? Well, in our view, if we're designing for the next generation of imaging, we should go for the real target, which are these two things in our head. Been around for 1 million or more years, depending on whether you believe in evolution or not. But, you know, the human eye is an amazing piece of technology, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. But let's look at some real world scenarios. These are pictures from our lab in Sunnyvale, where I come from, and I wanted to show you some examples of real world light. One of the terms I'll be using is a measurement of how bright a light is. In ISO parlance, that's called candelas per square meter. We euphemistically call it nits, and I like to think that I'm nuts for nits, and hopefully you'll be too after this presentation. But looking at some real world examples, typical television content today, when graded in Hollywood, is graded so that the peak white is 100 nits. So that's one reference as you look at some of these numbers. 100 nits, and cinema, interestingly, is only 48 nits, or 14 foot Lamberts, which is a typical parlance in Hollywood. So we have an interesting conundrum that film, whose standards date back 100 plus years, that 14-foot Lambert standard came from work that says, okay, what's the slowest I can move the film through the projector and still call it moving? Not the fastest. Remember, the money guys are looking at all those spools of film on the floor. And then having settled on that, what's the brightest bulb I can put in front of it before I melt the film? Those are the standards that have been around for 100 plus years, till the advent of digital cinema. And on the television side, our TV standards emerged in the 50s and 60s when RCA and other companies developed the first CRT technology, CRT, cathode ray tube. I was there, Pablo was there before me, it sounds like. But cathode ray tube technology, amazing artifact of physics. Take an electron, hit a rare earth phosphor, hit the right mixture, you get photons out. Change the mixture, you can make them red, green, or blue, add them all up, and you can make white light. So those technologies, the colors that were used for rare earth phosphors and the brightness level were set back some 50 years ago. And we still emulate them today, even though the technology is no longer natively CRT based. But as you look at these examples, if you were standing in this cafeteria, that's about the average light level on that chair, 15 nits. Now remember, our reference is 100 for television and 48 for film, or 50 if you want to round it up. Yet standing there, looking out the window, there's a reflection from an adjacent building where the sun is shining on a window and reflecting back into this building. Anyone know how bright a noonday sun is in Sunnyvale? I do. 1.6 billion nits with a D. So the real world is 1.6 billion nits. And so as it reflects off that building, even through this window, it's still about 1,700 times brighter than the brightest white we can make on TV set. Yet if you're standing there, you could see that reflection. There's a halogen light, 130,000 plus nits, 1,300 times brighter than TV. And you could stand there and look at it. But at the same time, if you're looking up in the ceiling, you could see a black as about a fraction of a nit. all within the existing environment standing there. So human beings deal with high dynamic range every day. In fact, literature and science shows we can see 5 to 6 orders of dynamic range. Here's another example. In a car out in the parking lot, the average light level is, that's not a typo, 6,000 nits, or 60 times brighter than the brightest white we can make in a TV set. And it's hard to see from back there, but there's a reflection coming off the grill that's 50 times brighter than that. In the real world, reflections, or speculars as we call them in the scientific literature, can be 50 to 100, if not 1,000 times brighter than the average light level. In today's world, we clip them. In print journalism, we clip them. We don't have the dynamic range there either. But if you were standing there, the sense of realism you get from looking at that car comes from those speculars. And yet you can look underneath that car and you see there's 300,000 to 15 nits, and you can see them both equally. A couple of more examples. This is one I love. This is called blacktop. Yet in a noonday sun in Sunnyvale, it's 20 times brighter as black than the brightest white that we can reproduce on a TV set. Another reflection there. Here's another one. Standing inside a building, how many of you have done this with your cameras? You get a choice. Either you see the outside and underexpose the inside, or you see the inside and the outside is white. Technology has been a limitation. Our eyes have been able to see it for 1 million+ years, but our technology hasn't been able to capture it or reproduce it until recently. So, putting this all in context, let's talk about color. So, often we talk about bright and black, but in fact, in the real world, here's an example. Remember that 1.6 billion nits? Pat's rule is anything it hits gets very bright. And here's a flower that in nature is 14,000 nits, or 140 times brighter than the brightest white a typical TV set can reproduce. We see it, our technology couldn't. And you see some more examples here. So putting it all in context, here's the bottom line. As human beings, we go from 1.6 billion nits on the high side to about 0.000001, 10 to the minus 6 on the dark side. In fact, research has shown, given enough time, we can adapt in a dark environment and see as few as 40 photons. However, it takes a long time. So the practical question is, 30-minute scene changes on the dark side, probably not useful, and 1.6 billion nits, a small nuclear reactor burning out the eyes of customers, probably not a good entertainment experience. So the real question is, what's a useful range? And that's what we asked our scientists at Dolby. We do know this fact, of course, while we can see from sunlight to starlight, we can't see them at the same time. So the operative question is, what's a useful entertainment dynamic range? What would we like as human beings? We certainly have a context, as I mentioned today in television, the standards that pay bending, depending on what geography you're in, because we have 50 hertz countries and 60 hertz countries. But as a rule of thumb, that 100 nits I told you is a typical peak white number. And as we all know, white is the brightest color. Why? Because white's the sum of red, green, and blue. So any individual primary will never be as bright as white. And that 100 nits goes to white. In fact, in typical television, blue is only 10% of that. So to represent that big world of 15 orders of dynamic range, you get 10 nits of blue. Cinema, as I mentioned, is even worse. Half as bright, but wider colors. So the interesting conundrum creatives have, we've talked to them all the time, is the red bus of London that looks so good in Steven Spielberg's movie looks like Campbell's tomato soup on a Blu-ray, unless you fix it. So we've had an interesting conundrum between these two worlds of content for the last 100+ years. So the question we asked ourselves is, okay, forget technology, forget the legacy of CRTs, they served us well, convenient artifact of physics. Film, it's going away. When's the last time we bought a CRT? We still emulate them because production standards are based on it. Well, we asked ourselves at Dolby, what would we do without the limitations of existing technology? So first, some nomenclature. We're going to talk about a couple of things. When I talk about, go back here. So when we talk about a reflection or a specular, there's two types. One's a reflection you see here. Of course, the sun itself is a very bright light source. You have black levels, and then the average light level is typically called diffuse white. So 3 terms I'll be talking about. So in order to address this question without the limitations of technology, our crazy scientist guys in Sunnyvale, where I'm at, took a digital cinema projector, the kind that would illuminate a 100-foot screen in a movie theater, took that bad boy, focused it down on a 21-inch LCD panel, as you can see here. And by doing that, could make a 20,000 nit pixel, right? 200 times brighter than what a typical TV set would do. And then by adjusting some of the displays, we could make very, very dark content. And the purpose of all this was to find out what would you, human beings, consumers, viewers, prefer if we did not have the limitation of technology today. And the way this experiment worked, here's one example. You'd have this image, you're sitting in front of the screen, that little LCD screen, with a mouse, and you could click and go, okay, at the first step, the diffuse white, which is the background, equals the highlight, which in this case you wouldn't know until you click and see, oh yeah, it's the sun. And you could keep clicking up and back until you got to the point where you said, I like that. And you could go all the way up to a 20,000 nit sun if you're crazy, or something in between. And we created a whole bunch of different test materials, night scenes, all kinds of different colors, to see across demographics, male, female, expert, non-expert, all the usual stuff, to try to statistically see what would human beings prefer if technology wasn't the limitation. The result was shown here. For luminance, of course, the brighter goes towards the right, and then the cumulative distribution function shown vertically. What we found was, for black level, people would like blacks much blacker than they are today. No surprise if you've been to a movie or watched your TV sets. Even the white level, much brighter, 4,000 nits, 40 times brighter than where they are today. And then for highlights, some crazies, mostly technical folks, but if you wanted to hit the 90th percentile, which is an engineering design goal, is a good number, wanted up to 20,000 nits. So, and a dynamic range of 4 million to 1, or if you're a camera buff, 22 f-stops. That's what you would prefer. It's not what we deliver. You can see an example of what's done today down here in cinema and television stands. Remember, TV is a little bit brighter, but not quite as black. Cinema has more colors. TV is brighter. So, the bottom line was, viewers wanted 200 times more brightness and 4,000 times more contrast than we deliver today. So, in our testing, the conclusion was the next generation of imaging for these parameters, consumers would like 0.005 up to 20,000 nits. Putting that in context, we now have our marching orders as engineers. If we're designing for you and the human eye, that would be a reasonable target to go for. Now, how do we make a 20,000 nit display? You saw what it took us to do in our lab. We don't recommend digital cinema projectors in your living room anytime soon. But as engineers, it's a design target. Much like we've done for audio, we're trying to design for the real target, the human eye. Where we are today, well, here's a Blu-ray infrastructure, for example, and you see the dynamic range there. And today our production standards are actually the limiting factor. CE folks, like my colleague here from Sony, the TVs are actually better than the Hollywood content, and nothing makes me happier than show Hollywood how the TVs are better than the content they're providing as a production master. And they've gotten the message and beginning to look at it. So part of the work that we're doing is actually looking at the end-to-end ecosystem, because this cannot be fixed just by the TV set. We've actually got to get better content, come up with better ways of delivering that dynamic range, and bringing it to the consumer. So in closing, I'm here as an advocate for better pixels, but let me be clear, at Dolby we love all our pixels, more, faster, and better, and actually believe the next generation entertainment experience is the right combination of not only more, we love 4K, particularly as we talk about glasses screen 3D, but we also think when you go to a higher dynamic range, things like frame rate become important because of judder and other things. So the right answer, we think, is a combination, not just of more, but faster and better. So hopefully that'll be and pairs. Got to pairs of pixels. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you.
I think you mind giving some response or just talking to me?
Sure. Like I said, I didn't prepare a presentation today, so I'm just going to kind of, I think the points Pat makes are excellent points. And if you look, and I mentioned it when I talked earlier, if you look at where LCD TVs have come from the early 2000s to today, a lot of the effort has gone into black levels by backlight control. That TV is a full array backlight, so we can go absolute zero nits, turn off the LEDs, and with the XDR technology that we have in that TV, we can extend the dynamic range probably close to 1500 nits on that TV. And you talk about cinema, so we actually have two cinema modes in that TV. The first cinema mode, Cinema 1, is based on the standard, which is film, 120 nits, very, what you see in the movies and how film was graded to be seen. But then we have the Cinema 2, which actually we turn on our XDR function, and we start showing a lot of a more dynamic range that people want to see. And I totally agree. I think human beings see things much wider world than our TVs are showing us today. And that's an end-to-end issue. It's not just the production or distribution or display, but it's just the limitation of where we're at. So the points that you're making are excellent. And in terms of, I think you did very, very well on the contrast, but in terms of resolution, I think when I started doing CRTs are an analog beast. You look at a TV, it's scanning, it's analog, you see no pixels. And our eyes, when you look around the world, there are no pixels anywhere. It's analog. So that's what our eyes want to see. So when you talk about more pixels, you're not just talking about more information, but you're talking about what your eyes want to see. They want to see less pixels and more real information. And I think that's where it's very key. And talking about 4K today, because of the way that we want to be immersed in the TV, we're going to talk about 8K and not so distant future, I believe. We're already starting to see 8K as something that's coming. People are talking about it, but I think it's just where human beings want to be at, what they want to see. They want to see higher contrast, they want to see higher, more information, no pixels, and then color. That's another big area that I think has improved a lot. And with CRTs, we talked about the phosphors, they were limited to what the colors they could produce in phosphors. So that's why we have our standards today, and that's why we're limited to the colors that we see today. With backlighting that's improved on the TVs over the past years, we've gone from CCFL to LED, white LEDs, and then we talk about wide color gamut LEDs, which we have on our TVs today. And then you start showing a much more wider range of color than you could a few years ago. The problem is the content is not there. So we are faced with again, as Pat mentioned really well, we're in an area where we can display more on our TVs than is available in the content. So there's been some efforts to standardize and to bring out more of the color. DCI, I think, it has a much wider color range, and today, our TVs with white color gamut can come close to DCI. Not quite there, but they can come close to that range, but the content doesn't support it yet. There's been some efforts in Blu-ray with XVYCC and standards like that, but still, because film is still 709, it's not been an easy adoption rate. So, but again, I think in the future, we'll start seeing more and more of what we call more immersive, and the technology is getting there where we can actually make the TV become more lifelike. And we're talking about OLEDs coming up soon. We're talking about all those technologies that are going to enable more of what we want to see on the TV. And I think the point of contrast, and on the demo that I can show you today, I can show you a small element of what Pat's talking about on the extended dynamic range and the benefits that can give you. And it's not content that's been designed for high dynamic range, but it's just it's on a regular Blu-ray. The content is there, and we're just trying to bring out more of the realism of the content on our TV. So I totally agree. You made really excellent points. So I really hope, and I agree with your direction that you're headed, and I really hope that as technology, like you said, it inspires, because we need to have that inspiration for the engineers who are making the displays to say that's where we're going to go. And I think that's, the standards have to come out to push us to develop those TVs. So, yeah.
Yeah, just to comment on the standards themselves, SIMPTE, Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers, is now working on a standard. I'm chairing the group that's supported by all 6 studios, including Sony Pictures, your brethren, on a container that will support up to 10,000 nits. Remember, our reference today is 100 nits. One of the terms I'll leave you with, we often talk, anyone familiar with that horseshoe diagram, CIE 1931, you know, the plot of all the colors human beings can see? And to Pablo's point, that world of CRTs, if you were to plot the 3 colors in there, it makes a triangle. We can see, you know, a lot more, but we're only able to reproduce a subset. Cinema was bigger than that. There's a new set of standards now in ITWR that are called Rec 2020, BTU Recommendation 2020, that has primaries based on lasers, that now have gotten even closer to that ideal of what the human eye can see, but not quite. The problem with that diagram is it misses a very important point about the intensity of all those colors. So when you now say, I have a blue, remember I said blue is not as bright as white? And you look at all the possible values of blue and all the possible values of green, and then in between, you actually get a 3D volume, right? Every color at every possible intensity. And that color volume is now what's the new focus of a lot of this work. And in the SIMPTE standard, we're looking at a color volume that has a peak luminance up to 10,000. And that Hollywood's beginning to move in this direction because we got to fix the content problem. Sony's TVs, and I'll go on record, are better than Hollywood's content. Many of the TVs are. And so the studios actually have to fix their content for the next generation. I can tell you the creatives that have looked at this stuff are really excited. So we're going to see it coming, and it's an exciting time because I think the content, once it gets better, will create healthy competition in making better displays. My one word of advice is don't, well, except for Sony, don't buy a TV right away. Sony 4K TVs are one of the best, and we'll talk a little bit about, you didn't mention anything.
I agreed with everything you said except for that last part.
Yeah. Except for the quantum dots. You know, you didn't mention quantum dots, and I hope we get to talk about that a little bit.
We can talk
we're
about
big
it a little
fans
bit.
about that. Okay.
Let's move on to comment.
Yep, sure.
Here you go.
All right. So, long time back, I used to do similar stuff on cinema, the TV, but then we realized that most of the people watch movies on iPads or phone these days than the TVs anymore, because TVs are kind of almost become filler element. You watch things, but you don't critically watch. But an iPad, you are just like here, you are watching it from really pixel peeping. So that's what we have found, and then we try to make things like mobile displays look better, and we claim these days the best mobile display so far, according to the measurements, is Kindle HDX, and which runs on Snapdragon. So, but the most critical element is all these are fine, high resolution displays, high contrast. Those things are moving into mobile displays, but I'll also talk about what are the trends in mobile display, but the most critical element is power. You can drive all these things, but it consumes a lot of power. So how do you actually manage the power so that you can probably watch a 3 hours movie or a 10-hour video over while you're flying from let's say Los Angeles to Tokyo. You have to watch it on your iPad, and you're sitting somewhere back in the economy class where you don't have even a power to plug into. So yes, that's our goal. So you have to make sure that the battery lasts from Los Angeles to Tokyo, and then later on probably from New York to Tokyo with one charge. This is the rapid pace of mobile technology, and some of the specs that we see here are quite astounding. Which one is the project? How is the pointer? Okay. We have 2.5 gigahertz CPUs, quad core. We have GPUs at 4.8 gigapixels per second fill rate. And if that, to give you a contrast of Xbox One that came out last year is around 12.5 gigapixels per second. So your latest smartphone is just 2.5 times less powerful than Xbox One in terms of GPU power. 4K by 2K HEVC encode and decode are supported, so that you can film 4K by 2K so that you can show it on 4K by 2K display. And 55 megapixel camera. Well, I don't know what you do with it, but yeah, 55 megapixels are supported. Maybe you use 227 megapixel or 515 megapixel. Then a whole lot of sensor and temperature sensors, connectivities, and then we have the displays. Ultra HD is supported, 4K by 2K, and it's not just one Ultra HD. This smartphone, the current generation of Qualcomm smartphone, or the smartphone processor supports two 4K by 2K displays simultaneously. So you can imagine, you are not just content watching in here, you want to also beam it to the 4K by 2K display that Pablo is designing. So you have to watch it. While you are watching the movie, you want something else your kids want. And all of that is controlled from the smartphone or the tablet. And then the whole lot of connectivity. But overall, what we see is the display is the center of all smartphone experience or movie viewing experience or anything. The way phones are bought in maybe 50% of the market, it's not like you read Engadget review or CNET reviews. Let's say when people buy phones in China or India or Brazil, all they do is they take the phone, they take a picture and see it on the display. So what you need to do is you make the camera good, you make the display really vibrant, pump out maximum brightness, and you can sell the phone. And while the phone is on the showroom floor, it should also be brighter and more colorful than the competing phones. So making the display look better, better pixels, brighter pixel is quite important in mobile too. Now this was a consumer research done back in 2012. The question was, what do you like best about your smartphone? And overwhelmingly, you can see that high resolution display. Maybe that was the time when Apple came out with the Retina display and everyone bought iPhone, and maybe that's what they like. But yeah, you can see that high resolution display is one of the most liked features in the smartphone. Now where the display resolution trends are going. So these are all different resolution. But what we can see here, the tablets are moving very close to 4K by 2K very soon. And the smartphones have still a long way. But the bulk of the smartphones is there's a premium tier smartphones, 720p, 1080p, and 2560, 1440. LG G3 is already 2560, which is 4 megapixel, and then you go to 8 megapixel here. Imagine you see the demo of 4K by 2K, 65-inch. Now imagine that same resolution in a 10-inch tablet. The question what we get asked is, what do you see? Maybe you see this better rendering of Chinese and Japanese script. But this is what the trend is, more or less. The smartphone is lagging behind the tablet, but it's by a couple of years in terms of resolution. And with the resolution increase, there is a whole lot of new interface that needs to be supported. Let's get over that. But then we go back to the key attributes. What do you like about your phones? So one is resolution, more number of pixels, and then the display quality. As Pat said, that better pixels, brighter, more colorful, and better contrast. And finally, you still have to make that phone last from Los Angeles to Tokyo flight. So what is the resolution limit of human visual system? So there are three aspects of it. There is one is the spatial resolution, which all we hear about, 4K by 2K or 2 megapixel or 4 megapixel. There's the other thing is the tone scale, what he talked about, the contrast sensitivity. It's not just about the resolution. I can just give you a gray image with no detail, and you can't really appreciate the 4K by 2K. You need to have the content with the right tonality to appreciate the 4K by 2K. and then the temporal aspect. Moving images don't really have that much of resolution. We'll primarily focus on the spatial and the tone scale. How many of you know about Snellen chart? Not you. So, anyone remember the eye test that the optometrist puts on in the optometrist office? That thing that with the letters, what you see from 6 meters distance, that's called the Snellen chart. And if you can read the penultimate line, you have a 20/20 vision without your glasses, or corrected 20/20 vision with your glasses. So that's your acuity, Snellen acuity, and which on a display which you hold it around 12 inches from your eye, that comes to around 300 ppi, which Apple called the retina display. That's your acuity of your eye. So it's like the 20/20 vision. But there is a whole lot of different acuity called vernier acuity, which is slightly more than, not slightly, it's quite a bit more than the Snellen acuity. What it says is that you can see even more than Snellen, what your eye can see, the Snellen acuity. But how you can see the mismatch of the perpendicular lines. Or so imagine you can see maybe two lines which have the 300 ppi, but if each of the line is little off by few millimeters or few microns, you can still see the difference. But you really can't see it in terms of the sine curve or anything. But you can see the phase difference between these two curves. So that's the vernier acuity, and that's quite 10x higher than the Snellen acuity. So that means, do you need 3000 ppi to see better? No, it really doesn't work that way. So what all it does is the vernier acuity, mobile displays are 8 bits. There's no real motivation to go to 10 bits or 12 bits because it costs money. So the vernier acuity with more resolution can actually give you a dithering. So it approximates that 10 to 12 bits that you're not seeing, or what you can see it on the bigger displays, the TV displays, the 10 bits or 12 bit displays. The vernier acuity, so putting more number of pixels actually gives you that fake dithering effect that we are talking about, so that you can see better tonality, more contrast. So then the other part is the color. So in color there are two aspects. One is the intrinsic aspect, which is the how good your display is, and the other is the extrinsic or the perceived improvements that is done by the display processing. It's fine to have a panel with good color response, but you still have to show the images properly, otherwise it may just look bad. So that's the tight coupling between the display and the display processing, what makes some devices look better than the other. We always talk about, I think you talked about this gamut. So this is the color gamut, which is, this is the sRGB, which typically the smartphone, not the smartphones, the cameras used to take pictures in sRGB, which is 72% of NTSC, the TV standard. Adobe RGB moved very close to the 98% of the NTSC standard. And then he's talking about the Rec 2020, which is pushing the boundary of what your eye can see. But this is only possible with pure red, white, and blue color with a very fine or very narrow spectral lights. And that's possible with laser, but not possible with any other, let's say a backlight or a LED light. You cannot have that narrow spectrum. So though it's Rec 2020 is coming as a standard, it's very difficult to make a display, especially a mobile display that can conform to Rec 2020. But we can do the processing for it. So this is where the intrinsic parameter comes in. So a display, the LCD display is primarily, you have the nematic molecules, and then you have the filters, color filters, and then you see the final output, and you have a backlight here. The narrower the spectral response of the color filters, better color you see. So what we always show is the example from iPad 2 to iPad 3. So there's a dramatic difference between the chromaticity of two displays. So this is what iPad 2 had. Smaller color gamut. The colors are not as saturated or pure as what you see in your eye. And then iPad 3 pushed the color points, and you have a better color gamut. So the difference between iPad 2 and iPad 3 is it's close to sRGB, and this is close to Adobe RGB. But how did they do it? So all it involved was better color response from the color filters and the backlight. So this is iPad 2's spectrum, and this is iPad. So the moral of the story is you make the color spectrum narrower, you can see better colors. And the narrowest color spectrum is possible if you use laser, but that probably will never happen or probably very difficult to do it in mobile, or a TV probably will have laser color. So let's move on. And then the next is the picture enhancement, the signal processing behind it. Even though you have good color, you still have to do the color management to show the colors properly. So your studio has encoded the images in certain color format, and your display has a different color gamut. So how do you manage this difference between the input and the output color gamut is what the color management is. And you can do some of this trick where you can push the primary colors to make it look vivid. You push the saturation of the green, saturation of the blue, so that the image looks more vibrant. This is always done in TV as well as in mobile displays. So that, as I mentioned, that you have to make the customer buy the phone. And when there are 10 phones on the showroom floor, the one that has the better blue and the better green, and you show this particular demo clip, they will pick your phone. Then we go into the contrast, the tone mapping algorithm. So the whole lot of tone mapping algorithm, the continuity backlight. This is for the OLED. So one is for LCD, one is for OLED, because LCDs have their own backlight, OLEDs don't have backlight. So you can scale the pixels itself to save power. And then you have the sunlight view visibility improvement. You take your smartphone outside in bright sunshine, you can't see anything, or just probably black and white screen. So how do you make the smartphone still look better if you go take it outside? And that part of it is also the contrast enhancement to make get some details out of the darker region of the image. There's some demo. This is what my team and we in Qualcomm did it, the sunlight viewability improvement. You see that it's 33,400 lux outside the sunlight, and the difference between these two screens. Exactly same phone, but the processing done so that you can see better rendering in bright sunlight. Then we come to the power consumption. Still, you have to make the phone last longer. The backlight power reduction. All smartphones mostly are either OLED or LCD. So the backlight power is what drives most of the power in the smartphone. So you scale the backlight and make the image look still the same, and you save power. For OLED, you can't do that because you don't have a backlight. So you scale the image itself. So you make the more pixels go to dark. So when the pixels are darker, they don't emit light, and then it saves power. So these are the backlight scaling algorithms. Then we call the AP power, which is application processor power. It's basically power management. And then you reduce the multimedia power. So the amount of power needed to play a 1080p content or a 4K by 2K content, you need to reduce it so that the overall power goes down. And one of the other elements is you try to do less memory transaction. So when most of the time we see emails or web browsers, and they don't refresh really at 60 Hertz. So you can detect whether that's a static image and you don't really refresh it from the memories, you can save a lot of power. The third thing is, the peak of the thing is the panel power. You reduce the interface power, the number of transactions from the application processor to the panel. You do it by doing things like frame buffer compression, interface compression, etc. to reduce the interface power. There's this thing called panel self-refresh, which is when the panel, the best example is probably the smartphone, where you can keep the display almost on. So I think like this. This is refreshing from its own memory, and it's not really using any of the application processor power. So this is called panel self-refresh. And you reduce the refresh rate. If you are watching web browser or reading your emails, there is no need to drive the panel at 60 Hertz. You can drive it at 40 Hertz or 45 Hertz, or as fast as the LCD can drive. And then the newer panels, such as IGZO. This is a whole new class of panels with a different backplane, which can refresh even at lower. So for smartphones, you can really reduce the refresh rate and that will save power. This is what we talk about, that all said and done, you still have to maintain the visual quality. If your images still don't look good, it doesn't matter how good your power management is. And this is one example where you save 21% of power by really almost keeping it untouched, and then you reduce the power to 55%, then you lose all the contrast in the image. Same as the OLED power, I said that the power consumption of LCD remains the same depending on the content. But OLED, the power consumption is significantly different depending on what content you show, and so the blacker content you see, you show on the screen, more power you'll save. So you'll see that phones like Samsung's or LG's, which have OLED screens, they typically maintain always darker background. So your image, the emails would be white on dark rather than dark on white, so that you save more power. And this is what we talk about, that you scale the power, scale the pixels towards dark, you save a lot of power. The 22% power saving is significant in mobile phones. And this is the frame buffer compression. So less amount of data you send from panel to application processor to panel, that's you save power because that's less number of transactions. And this is the panel I was talking about, the IGZO panel, indium gallium zinc oxide, if you are interested to know what IGZO stands for. This is a different kind of backplane. So in typical LCD, the structure is similar to this. So there is a capacitor, and the capacitor cannot hold charge for more than close to around 22 milliseconds. And so you need to refresh it every 22 milliseconds. And if you want 16 millisecond response, then you refresh it every 16 milliseconds. But IGZO backplane capacitors can hold the charge longer. So you don't, if you're not changing content, you can just refresh it slower and you can save significant power. That's more or less, these are the takeaway points you can read. Sure.
I apologize, air conditioning was off for a while, failure or something, reset magic, it's back on. Yeah,
I can take
it's
a
all
joke.
fixed now.
I think I'm going to stand here if it's okay. You want to see what I'm talking about. Legend 3D, whoops. There we go. Again, we turned 2D movies into 3D. We're doing most of the tentpole films in Hollywood. There's our studio right there. We have about 60,000 square feet in Carlsbad. This is a very labor-intensive process, and we've got about 400 people in India as well. I have a blog, and I'm kind of promoting my blog a little bit here because it all fits. I mean, everything everyone spoke about here kind of sort of culminated in the last, I would say 4 weeks in the writings that I've been presenting. This is one of the first things that I want to show. Basically, my blog allows me to critique the consumer electronics industry. I'm a content guy, so I can do that. And what I believe is that when 3D first came out, it was shoved down our throats. And everybody thought it was going to be the next standard. And it was just too much, too fast, and also too soon, because there was no content. So I think that that's primarily why it initially failed. Now, how many people here think that 3D is dead? Raise your hand, seriously. Good? Brave people? Great, okay. I'm going to show you today that it really isn't. All-time box office, highest grossing films. All the films in gold are 3D. Now, take away Titanic, since that's a cheat. That's a re-release. But all of those are all 3D. 2013, box office, highest grossing films, all of those in gold. are 3D, and the majority of them are converted, similar to my company or done by my company. 2014, the same trend is happening. Same trend. And now what's happening is, what we're finding is that any movie that can generate about $150 million is going to be profitable, more profitable if it's in 3D. And the cost of conversion, what we do, has gone down tremendously. In fact, it's between $4 and $7 million to do a feature film. So if you take a movie that's got a budget of $250 million, $200 million, which is pretty typical, it's not a very big part of that budget. And it can be a tremendous amount of incremental revenue. What's happening now is between 2014 and 2015 is the biggest year for 3D. We're going to have 70 plus 3D movies released. And again, it's going to be the biggest year next year, and we're all looking forward to it. The majority of those films will probably be converted very much like what we do. So, in part of that particular blog, I started talking about the home TV experience. Eventually, is going to be superior to the feature film, in the theater. You know, the exhibitors were worried back when color came in, and obviously that didn't affect the theaters. They were worried about high def, that didn't affect the theaters. But when you take 3D, ultra high definition, high dynamic range, high frame rate, what you have is something that's unbelievable. I've seen Pat's demonstration of high dynamic range, and that's something I personally can't live without. Once I saw it, it's something that I have to have. And hopefully Rec 2020 is going to eventually be here. I mean, it's going to be here soon, because I think that anybody here, 4K is great, 8K is great. Combine that with high dynamic range, and you have experience that you have never seen before. So how will movie theaters get their mojo back? Because they will lose attendance. They certainly will, because these large screen TVs are going to be unbelievable in terms of brightness and everything else. Well, this is going to be incentive for the movie theaters to go laser projection. The laser projection will give you the same, if not better, quality imagery than you would get at home. So, and not only that, but you have the group dynamics of a theater. So that's basically how theaters are eventually going to get their mojo back. Now, I also have some issues with 3D. There's one type of 3D called auto stereo, glasses-free 3D, that I've been writing about consistently for the past 2 years. And don't look at that hat. And
oh boy, fodder for debate.
That olive branch.
When I left NAB this year, I mean, basically I was going to write a blog, and I was going to say, is it sizzle or fizzle? And actually I wrote this before I went to NAB, and I felt it was a total fizzle. I simply couldn't see anything close to a consumer product there. Now, auto stereo, the way it works basically is it's lenticular. You've got a sweet spot, and for a telephone, or a tablet, or even a laptop, that's great, because I'm moving that sweet spot around, and I got it now. Okay, if I look like this, it's going to go away, and it's always going to be like that until somebody comes up with a eye tracking technology for cell phones, tablets, and laptops. I was hopeful that Amazon smartphone was going to basically do that, but it turned out not to be genuine 3D. But they've got most of the technology in there to do auto stereo correctly, and I'm hoping that somebody's going to come up with it. I don't know why they avoid using eye tracking. Now, eye tracking, again, works great for a cell phone and for a single person display. But as you can imagine, you can't really do that if you have a television in a family room. And not only that, but everybody in the family room is going to have to find their own sweet spot. And if they're reaching for popcorn, well, the sweet spot's going to go away. And you're going to see basically the 3D effect goes away. So I think that what happens is you go to NAB, you go to CES, and you see these auto stereo televisions, and people are just they go crazy. Oh, I'm not wearing glasses. I'm seeing 3D. This is amazing. Now, there are some of the people who are displaying auto stereo who knock down the parallax, knock down the 3D, so that it would be less jarring when you actually move away from that sweet spot. And that's what's done at some of these conferences. But with these same people who are just amazed at this television you can see 3D without glasses, if they had bought it, I think they'd return it within a week, because I think everybody in the family would probably say, this is crazy, you know. It's great when you see it once for a few minutes at NAB or CES, but at home it's absolutely not going to work. At least that's my feeling. That's the feeling of a lot of other people too. And the quote under there, auto stereo glasses for 3D is 10 years away and always will be. That's not my quote. That was a quote from someone who went to NAB in 2013. And basically, it was in Variety. And basically, she was saying, this is one of the things she was hearing from many of the engineers. So I think, you know, after hearing what all the panelists were talking about, year 2020 is going to be an amazing year, because we're in the digital world, and everything is changing. There are no rules. There's going to be technology that's going to be absolutely amazing, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. And it's going to be on many different devices. It's going to be on wearable devices. It's going to be on everything. So, you know, as a futurist, the sky's the limit, and digital is going to make our lives very interesting and very entertaining. Thank you.
We have a little bit of time left for questions. Let me just ask one first question and hopefully get some audience feedback. It's well, as a technologist, we can make great images, we do all this technology and things together. The question is, will people be able to pay for it? Particularly not just in terms of money, but in terms of power. You mentioned having a nuclear reactor for your son or something.
1.6 billion nits.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, those you were showing there, those were shown on here, so I saw something. The question is that good enough? Will I pay for something more than that? You guys have any comments on will people be willing to pay for this? So it's going to cost some money with the improvements?
Yeah, I think what I said is true. And once you've seen it, you're going to pay for it. Seriously, it's that amazing. It really is.
So, you know, engineers view one thing, consumers another. So we did testing up in the Bay Area with 600 consumers. The requirement was you had an HDTV set and internet connectivity. Even homeless people in the Bay Area have that. So, and then we went across demographics, and we showed them images. Nowhere, I mentioned the standard that we're proposing goes up to 10,000, but we showed them a standard display graded with 100 nits. In fact, the display itself wasn't yours, sorry, but a consumer display could go even brighter than that. Then we showed them a reference display at 500 nits, or 5 times the grade, and then 1,000. The firm we use does a lot of these consumer tests, and in fact, were very independent. They wouldn't listen to anything we told them to do. They said, no, we're going to do it right. They did things like left-right bias, which we never would think of as engineers, adjusted the TV sets. Ask 2 key questions. A, can you see a difference? And B, do you value it? Out of 600 consumers, at 500 nits versus the 100 nits, 91% said, yes, I see a difference, and B, yes, I value it. At 1,000 nits, which is much less than what we're actually targeting about for the standard, That number went up to 93%. Anyone that's done consumer surveys, anything beyond 1 or 2 sigma is significant. 91% is 3 sigma. So as Barry and every time I've done this demo, even presidents of studios could go, well, yeah, I like that better. So yes, you can see, because you can see light from across the room. And the issue with more resolution, it's great. I'm a big fan of 4K, but you have to be at the right distance. And you mentioned, 30 cycles per degree. That's the limit of the human visual system in terms of spatial resolution. So there's a factor of screen size versus viewing distance. Now, many of us, 85-inch screen in your living room, you'd be close enough to get the benefit. You get a little bit farther back, it's going to be a little harder to tell. There's a lot of interesting ideas about quad HD and doing multiple scenes with that kind of a panel. But light, you can see from across the room, whether it's a TV set or an iPad or even a mobile phone, because contrast ratio is important. So, yes.
I guess my follow-up is how much would we be willing to pay for that? Going to discount on a battery life, it only lasts for 10 seconds, it's not very useful. There has to be a trade-off between that value and that cost.
Well, actually, Barry and I were complaining about Qualcomm, what they're doing. Because if you talk to the studios, we had a panel at SIMTI with folks from Pixar and actually someone from NVIDIA saying, wait a minute, for power savings, we're going to muck up your artistic intent. Basically what you're doing from the Hollywood viewpoint. And we talked about, is there something we could do better to say, if you're going to muck up our artistic intent because of power consumption, which everyone agrees, do it in this sort of order of priority. But I would argue that in terms of making higher dynamic range images versus, and I said we love all our pixels, more, better, faster, but in the end, in delivering an entertainment experience, it comes down to bits. And one of my other sayings is bits are bucks. And what we want as consumers is the best bang for my bit budget. So if you do higher dynamic range over HD, our experience has shown not everything needs all the high dynamic range. You've seen lots of content. And it's about a 15% data rate hit. When you go to 4K from 2 to 8 megapixels, before we do anything, it's 400% more data. Now, HEVC reduces the bit rate hit, maybe to 200%. But, it's a combination. That's why I'm a big believer in that what the right combination is the big question and what consumers will buy.
I think from our perspective, I mean, you look at that TV over there, which is top of the line, 65-inch TV that we sell today.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful TV. I think most people look at it and say, I'd love to have that TV. How much is it? It's $8,000. So, all right, then that puts it into perspective, and that is, like I said, that is the top of the line TV. If we start adding everything we're talking about, we have a short throw laser projector. It's $40,000. So, I mean, it's a great projector. It'll put 147. It's a beautiful picture on your wall. But how many people are going to pay for that? That's kind of, I think, where we all need to work together to figure out where the consumers are willing to pay. I think we understand the benefit, and it's our job to communicate to the consumers what the benefit is and understand how much they're willing to pay for that. So I think that TV has a great market.
Yeah.
I mean,
Any comments about that? Everybody's talking about there's no installed base of televisions, 3D televisions. Well, in fact, there are. After the hype, it went underground more or less. People just didn't. It was still there, but nobody put a big 3D on it. And they were looking at 4K or looking at other things. And today, if you want to buy a television like Pablo's beautiful 4K, you can buy that, and even if you had no intention of watching 3D or you had no intention of buying it for that feature, it's got 3D in it. And so there's a lot of people out there with televisions that have 3D in it, and they're going to use it eventually, and they're going to get sold.
Back to your power thing. Your pulsar displays your monitor. How many watts does it use when you're reaching the 4,000 or the 10,000 bits? Because realistically, when you talk about utilities, power consumption,
Yeah. So I got your question. Let me repeat it. So he was asking, it's Stephen asking a question about power consumption for high dynamic range displays, and he referenced our pet name for the one that we developed at Dolby is Pulsar, because it makes a 4,000 nit pixel and has a color volume that goes up to that. And it was developed 4 years ago as a lab experiment. It has, in order to get the LEDs to get bright enough, it's liquid cooled. It draws like 40 amps. It was never meant to be a product. We showed at NAB the next generation display, and like Sony, we're big fans of quantum dots. The display we showed there was a 32-inch diagonal display. It draws less than 100 watts. It will do 2,000 nits, and if we don't care about using it for reference quality, it'll go to 4,000. It draws less than 100 watts. Turns out that in seeing dynamic range, like in this room now, and why is my voice going up and down? I'm going to kill the audio lady. I'm coming for you. No. But in this room, now look, around, there's remember the average luminance level? So if I look at the crowd here, probably, you know, in the middle of you is the average luminance level. Maybe it's, I don't know, 70, 80 nits. But you can look at the fluorescent lights. Those are typically about 4,000 nits, right? No one's wearing sunglasses, right? I hate when people give me that crap, I'm going to need sunglasses to watch my TV. We're not talking about a 4,000 nit light bulb. We're talking about real-world content in dynamic range. So the average number of pixels that get above that sort of level we live in today isn't that much. And then, of course, any of us who've done TV power supply designs, you know, you calculate for the average power, and you might have a spike where a scene comes up, but then it goes back down. So the power hit isn't that great. We're big believers in quantum dots as the technology that will make it possible. We love OLED, but if you want to get to 4,000, 5,000 nits, we don't think OLED's going to make it. So the answer to your question is, Pulsar was not a product, never meant to be. It was a proof point, and there's still nothing in the world that can match it because it does cinema color primaries as well as 4,000 nits, and is what studios are now using to grade movies, which is in process now. From a consumer display viewpoint, we think quantum dot technology will happen, and companies like Sony understand it well. So we don't think the Energy Star kind of issues that people often talk about, that's just a delaying tactic. It's not reality.
Yeah, and with OLED, if you have high dynamic range, I think it'll also decrease the life of the set significantly, right?
Well, I shouldn't speak for Sony, but blues, we know about the problem with blues, but OLEDs for small devices, fantastic technology, very good blacks, but if you want high dynamic range, you've got to look at other solutions.
I think we have one other question.
Yeah, so you talked about the displays and the better quality, the higher dynamic range. The content guys love it, but there's the pipe to get in between them, and that, in our world today, pretty much has to be some flavor of MPEG. I guess I'm not aware of, does the current MPEG-4 or HEVC have the dynamic range? If it doesn't, is it a small increment to do it, or is it back to the drawing board, we've got to get MPEG 127 volt or something?
Did I pay you for this one? So not to do too much of a plug, but in terms of delivery to the marketplace, at CES, Dolby made the announcement of a number of partners, Amazon, Netflix, Vudu, Microsoft, Xbox Video, who are all looking at services using OTT delivery mechanisms. And what they want to do is a backwards compatible approach. If you're Amazon, you got petabytes of content in the existing 709 world, Blu-ray, for those of you who aren't techie geeks. 709 is the ITUR standard that defines those color primaries that Manak talked about. Is that, did I say it right? Backwards compatible approach, that's how they want to deliver it. And then the enhancement information for high dynamic range would come as a parallel stream. It can be MPEG-4, AVC. If people have moved to HEVC, it can also be HEVC. It's up to them. But the bit rate increment, this is back to my point, is about 15%. So if you're doing, I can't say too much about, I gotta be careful, NDAs, but bit streams for Netflix and Amazon, everyone uses adaptive streaming. Everyone know what adaptive streaming is? Raise your hand. Don't lie. Okay, adaptive streaming just means because the internet really stings for delivering video, what content providers do is have different qualities of it, and then when they get backlog and buffering over the internet, they switch to a lower resolution. So you might be paying for HD, but if Netflix doesn't have the bandwidth, it might slip back to SD for a while, and then it'll come back up. So that's adaptive streaming. So at the bit rates typically we see in the internet today, you're looking at 4 to 9 megabits. So an incremental 15% on top of that can give you high dynamic range. So our OTT partners are all looking at that kind of a service rollout, backwards compatible for all the legacy customers. Premium stuff that comes from Hollywood would have this extra stream, and I'll get really techie. You know, if it's MPEG ABC, you have 2 PIDs. One's the base layer PID and the other's the enhancement layer. Same transport stream, MPEG 4, take your pick your favorite codec, you can get delivered. That's doable today. OTT guys could do it now. The only thing they're missing is the content and then displays.
So MPEG as the standard today
It's not a limiting factor.
Cannot do it. And so they have to do a new MPEG or the
No, it works with existing MPEGs, but what you do is you create dual streams. In fact, existing MPEG is fine because the business model says, why would I want to get rid of petabytes of content that works perfectly fine for HD today? If they simply will add the additional information and then have it as an option for customers. So MPEG's not a problem. There is work already in MPEG to create a 12-bit profile for HEVC that in the future could make delivery even more efficient. But it works today, that's not the problem. Displays are what's needed, and there are a number of folks that are announced that they'll be building displays maybe as soon as this Christmas.
Do the cinemas have the toolkit they need to produce the higher content, or is there some additional set of technologies that have to be developed to actually have the content in the format to catch up with the rest?
So, good question. I mentioned the cameras today, whether it's Sony's F65, which is a fantastic, I'll give a big plug to Sony, one of the best cameras in the world, Red, the RE, all the digital cinema cameras have tremendous dynamic range, equivalent to what we took for granted with film. The cameras aren't the problem. Next step in the content creation chain is you now go with your Steven Spielberg, James Cameron, take your pick, and you sit in a color editing suite and you make creative decisions about the dynamic range. The tools to do that are already capable of supporting the dynamic range. In fact, the work we've done, we announced 2 partners that are already making files that preserve this stuff. So now you have the assets in the high dynamic range. Now the question is, how do I go through that funnel that I showed in the slides to deliver to today's ecosystem, or provide the capability to have an enhanced ecosystem? So the pieces are all there.
Okay. Thank you. Are we doing on time? Should we go last question?
We're out of time, but
We're out of
yeah,
time.
one more. Last
You
one.
get the one.
So.
Unless people want to stay.
Yeah.
You guys can stay after and talk.
We can
to
talk
people.
afterwards. I think we should go. Please.
The title of the talk was The Future of Displays, and it seems like mostly what has been talked about is the future of televisions and to a degree projectors. And the content that you've been talking about is mostly reproducing the images that humans see in the natural world and trying to make those more true to life. But I wonder if anyone has anything to say about alternative display technologies that aren't so common in people's homes, reflective technologies like e-ink and where they're going, or 2.5 displays, holographic things.
Yeah, I can take some of your questions. So, well, there are few types of displays, right? So one is the reflective type displays, what you said, the e-ink, or what we call in Qualcomm the Mirasol displays. So, but the problem of those displays are limited colors, limited color width depth, as well as the motion performance. So you can use it for very particular applications such as e-reader or smartwatch, that kind of, where the power saving is more critical than actually the motion performance or better color reproduction, etc. The other side of the display is where you need extremely high performance, very good color, very good brightness. So what Pat said about the quantum dot, that's one of the emerging display as you can think of, that as I mentioned in my talk, that when you make the color response as narrow as possible, you can get better colors, the color spectrum response. So quantum dot actually tries to do that, and the final extension would be if you have a laser backlight. But those are to make the colors look better. And the other option is where you can go add more dimensions to it. So autostereoscopic or stereoscopic displays are kind of one of the options, but there are other class of displays where you can do holography, but still way far in future. It's not even close to realization, unless you just want to do it in CNN's newsroom. So that's one of the options. The other option, there's a lot of work going on in head-mounted displays and heads-up displays, especially cars, also Google Glass, the wearable displays. Google Glass is just first version of a prototype, you could say. But have you ever used a Google display, Google Glass? Anyone has used a Google Glass?
Yeah, last week at our conference.
Okay.
So Google is selling them now, so they're still in beta, but yes, they are available. But it's basically you're looking through a glass and you're getting an image while you're looking at the real world.
Yeah, and then the problem is that the image is also found in one corner of your eye. So you always have to kind of squint your eye to one corner. It's very uncomfortable to do it. So heads-up display, doing it properly would be a very niche wearable, but the problem is what happens for all the glass wearers. So then Google has come up with this designer glass plus Google Glass kind of solution. But yeah, if a glass costs $1,500 now, so imagine you add the designer part of it, it's probably add another zero to it. But but that's the wearable part of it. Heads-up displays are becoming very popular in cars. I'd say popular, not very popular, but it's becoming popular because we have all this driver's assistance option that you see whether you're drifting from lanes. So it's kind of very unintuitive to actually look away from the lane and then see what's going on in the whether you're drifting from the lane. You'd rather be looking forward. So that's a different class. But then the problem is you have this bright sunshine of 1.6 billion nits. Probably you won't look at the sun directly, but still it'll be 40,000 or 50,000 nits light, and then you still have to see the display at that kind of ambient light. So that's a big challenge.
I would just add to that virtual reality, folks know that Facebook bought Oculus Rift. They were at our conference last week. It's a different experience. You put the glasses on, and it's a combination of technologies, not only display, but sensors. So now when I turn my head to the right, the image shifts to the right. So it's really, there's two classes. There's augmented reality, that's Google Glasses, and virtual reality, which is Oculus Rift. We had Jaunt VR and a number of other companies in this area. Because the fantasy is the holodeck. Can we get an entertainment holodeck where I'm really in Avatar? And Oculus Rift is pretty amazing. The problem right now, to Pablo's point earlier, there's not enough pixels, so I don't have that sense of being in this room. But we'll get there, and once you get enough pixels with the driving technology and the other sensory detectors, that's going to be pretty compelling. Might even be better than 3D. I mean, it'll be,
Thank
you
God.
know, I'm sorry, but Mary will be there. You know, so some pretty amazing stuff. But to your question about displays, I'm not quite sure where you wanted us to go. I mean, we talk about the technologies, but this, I think, the group here, you know, you got a TV guy, an entertainment technology guy, a creative guy, and a guy making mobile phones. I'm not quite sure what you wanted us to cover.
Well,
Amplify the question.
directly connecting the cable into your rods and
No, you're way behind. Total Recall. Just take a pill, and I saw the movie.
Have you been to our lab yet? I think we're probably running quite a bit past time. I know people may want to talk afterwards, but I think we can let it go.
Yeah, I'm glad you're talking.
Thank you,
You're-
speaker from last night.